The fantasy football season is Adam Schefter putting out a tweet that Rashee Rice's expected recovery is shorter than we all think. And then immediately after being announced that he's out for the season.
This is the worst.
Mota Zitabanakis, welcome into the worst fantasy show. I am your host with the least, Jack Lucenay. Welcome in, everybody, and thank you so much for stopping by. We are here to get into the studs and duds, aka the hearts and farts. Hit some waiver wire, but right off the top, we have some really terrible breaking news. Literally, Adam Schefter put out a tweet saying, "Oh, Rashee Rice's expected recovery shorter than we think." Nah, and he's gone. Unfortunately, the came across the underdog wire. I'll believe that one above all else at this point. But yeah, it seems like Rashee Rice unfortunately will miss the rest of the NFL season. So starting off with some bad news, but hey, you know what? Let's try and keep it positive. Let's talk about the guys that helped us this week because there are a lot of them. Let's get into the hearts. So, starting off with the quarterbacks, Smoking Joe Burrow is back, baby. The blonde hair really helped him with his fantasy day. Not so much, unfortunately, with winning the actual football game. Unfortunately, that didn't work out for the Cincinnati Bengals because the coach got cold potatoes at the very last second. But Joe Burrow was your number one fantasy quarterback on the week. I even had him as a start above Kyler Murray. So that was nice. But yeah, Joe Burrow, Kirk Cousins, Lamar Jackson, Joe Flacco, Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, even Daniel Jones and Bo Nix were serviceable. And then Stroud, Jordan Love, Dak, and Geno, they didn't ruin your week. So they were just right around that 20-point mark. So it was a good week for quarterbacks. For the running backs, Tank Bigsby is going to be a popular ad off of waiver wires. He was your number one running back on the week. So shout out to the zero RB truthers. This was their week because you also had DeAndre Swift, Rico Dowdle, Ramondre Stevenson, and then Derrick Henry still getting it done, especially with that last 50-yard run to set up the game-winning field goal in overtime. James Cook is probably going to be continuing to be the central figure of the Bills offense and the only relevant piece based on how Josh Allen's playing. You had Josh Jacobs, you had Tyrone Tracy, who will definitely come up later in the show. Kyron Williams just continues to be steady Eddie with the production. Chuba Hubbard, Trey Sermon, Chase Brown, Amir Abdullah, James Conner, and Brian Robinson got in there for 2 touchdowns. But really, this was the wide receiver week. The wide receivers went absolutely crazy. You had Jamar Chase dropping an official game-winning week. That's why you drafted him where you did in the first round. So it was really nice to see Jamar Chase showing up in that way. But more importantly, shout out to my guy Disco and Drake London having a massive week. Drake London out here dropping like a 30-point banger on a Thursday, no less. So you got to chill with that 30 points going into the week. And the fact it was crazy, Kirk Cousins threw the ball 50 times, and obviously he was one of our studs in the quarterbacks, but you had both Drake London and Darnell Mooney finish as the number 2 and number 3 fantasy wide receivers on the week. It would be interesting to see like how many times that's happened where, I mean, you've got pairings like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. How many times have they finished 2 and 3 on the week? But yeah, Alec Pierce is the funniest name on this list. He is the new Gabe Davis. You'll never know when to play him, but I think maybe he was definitely someone underserved in best ball circles of just the guy that's going to go and catch all these crazy deep passes. Brian Thomas Jr., one of my favorite rookies, one of my most highest drafted rookies. I had him ranked pre-draft even above Roma Dunes. Now I still had MHJ and Malik Neighbors as the 1 and 2, but I had Brian Thomas Jr. as a 3, and I thought he was just as good as those guys. And that depending on landing spot, he could be like the kind to really break out in the rookie season. So I thought that it's nice to see Brian Thomas Jr. really stepping forward, and Trevor Lawrence finally having a decent fantasy day. Fantasy day also really helped. DJ Moore, the revenge game hit. That was nice. T. Higgins had a big day also. Yeah, Darius Slayton popping up out of nowhere. Darius Slayton, hilariously, is like a best ball target of mine, where I took a lot of him in like the last rounds, where I just would really like pepper him late because these games will pop up. He always finishes with like 705. You don't want that in your redraft leagues or even in your dynasty leagues because you'll never know when to start him. But for best ball, that's healthy. And then you had Garrett Wilson. This is the one I got to eat crow on the most. I think it was the thing I was the most wrong about this week is I had him very much as a sit. I did not expect him to have 22 targets. That's not sustainable. The fact that he caught 13 for 101 on that 22 targets, like that's actually kind of gross. That's just like souped up Wan'Dale Robinson kind of numbers, right? So I don't think it's sustainable to get 22 targets a week. So I do think that the problem is the efficiency, right? If on 22 targets, he had 13 for 101. Well, if he only has 13 targets, now you're talking about like 7 for 60 something, right? And he did find the end zone. So that was very important, obviously, to his fantasy outcome. The other one that I was wrong about was Brandon Ayuk. And it wasn't even that I was wrong. It's just that I literally said, I think I'm waiting to see the breakout actually happen. Just because, it had been like he was going through the preseason still, and he got his money, but it felt like, having this training camp and preseason, he was still kind of getting up to like NFL game speed. And this was the game that like I think will now kind of unlock a more consistent version of Brandon Ayuk that we saw kind of last year. I think we'll see more of that now for the rest of this year going forward. So I'll feel more comfortable with him as a weekly wide receiver 2 again. Nico Collins, this one was just fucking, bro, we can't have nice things in fantasy football this year. What the fuck is going on with these hamstrings, my guy? None of these guys can keep a healthy hamstring. And I get it. I tweaked my hammy just playing flag football this year at the Fantasy Football Expo. So, I know these guys are going through a much higher level and, at the speed and everything, but it feels like there's been an inordinate amount of injuries this season. And Nico Collins especially just was dominating. He's the central figure of this team. He's been the number 1 wide receiver in fantasy, basically. And for him to, at least he had the long tutty to like really, put up a solid day before he went out. But him going out just sucked. It really sucks. And if he misses time, it's going to suck. And I feel bad for Nico Collins owners. I'm one of them in a lot of leagues, but yeah, this one sucked a lot. Jalen Tolbert, the quiet breakout continues. Zay Flowers, that was another one. I feel like I was wrong on a lot of wide receivers this week. Zay Flowers, though, again, it's like he had 7 for 111, I think, and no touchdowns. So if not for a crazy overtime shootout with the Bengals, that was, I think they put 70 points on the board between them. Like this week, they're going to be at home against the Commanders. Maybe we do see a little bit more of a shootout, but if they get out early and ahead, we've seen. I think the problem is when it coincides with the 200-yard Derrick Henry day, they just don't need to pass the ball as much, and therefore Zay Flowers not as involved. And if he's not involved on a PPR level, he's not an end zone guy. And that's kind of what we've seen is his big days have really been when they have to go really pass crazy. And then just some random names I threw in here for shits and giggles. Kadero Hodge, Diami Brown, and Keon Coleman all showed up. as wide receiver plays if you're in like 32 team leagues. For the tight ends, unfortunately, Kyle Pitts, my man had a good enough day that we're not going to play the drop this week for who scored more than Kyle Pitts, even though we did have some funny names just slightly ahead of him in Charlie Kolar and Isaiah Likely. But other than that, Kyle Pitts actually was a solid tight end play this week. He was better than pretty much everyone except for Tucker Kraft, Brock Bowers, and George Kittle, and the Ravens tight ends. Every Ravens tight end except Mark fucking Andrews was good. Kyle Pitts, and then this list after this is like the most random shit. So you either played Jake Ferguson and you were happy with the low level volume, or you got stuck maybe playing dudes like Brenton Strange, Jordan Akins, Connor Hayward. Connor Hayward showing up on this list is just a fuck you from Arthur Smith. I promise you guys. So I told you, fire me if you can't rely on him. Colby Parkinson was maybe the only true streamer on this list. Tyler Conklin and Trey McBride coming back from injury kind of had a low level like 6 for 50 game, which good enough to be a top 15 tight end on the week. And then on defense, you had the Giants. Ha, ha, ha. That was a big fuck you to me because I had the Seahawks defense, which Seahawks defense did have an awesome defensive touchdown. So it's not like they had a bad day, but then they lost to the Giants. So they had a worse day than I predicted of what they should have had. The Giants hilariously had I think they finished the game with 8 sacks or something crazy like that. So they were the number one scoring fantasy defense on the week. That absolutely, I can almost guarantee, unless you were just a hardcore Giants fan, nobody in their right mind started the New York Giants defense this week in fantasy. That is if you did it, send me the screenshot on Twitter at Jack Lucenay. I want to see it because I just don't believe you. So yeah, Giants defense. The Vikings, I played the Vikings in a couple leagues where I had them. The Bears showed up. The Bears defense starting to gain a little steam. That's something to keep an eye on. The Commanders, that was one that I had as a streaming option. And then the Broncos, same thing. I had them. I actually had them and the Raiders. I kind of thought that would just be a low-scoring kind of shitty game, so I had both Raiders and Broncos as streaming. But the Broncos defense has just performed better overall. And they've been pretty good on the year. I think you can take advantage of the Broncos defense. If they're playing a bad team, you can fire up the Broncos defense as far as a streamer. All right, before I jump into the duds and the farts, just a couple comments and questions here. Shout out to my guy, Jerry Bagshaw. My heart this week was for an IDP player, Rayshawn Jenkins. Yes, that was the one, the 100. So that was the one in the Seahawks game. Eric Gray at the goal line, literally, when I say at the goal line, that was, to me, I thought the ball was just slightly over, technically speaking, but he also was kind of losing it at the same time. So I could see how it just, because the call on the field was made as the defensive touchdown, they stuck with that. But yeah, Rayshawn Jenkins was the one that scooped and scored on the 102-yard fumble return for the Seahawks against the Giants. And I was looking like a fucking genius in the first half of that game when I said start the Seahawks defense because of exactly this. But it didn't work out so much for the rest of the game. And then shout out Rams House 99. Redraft, full PPR, Superflex, start 8 to 10 man. I have 2 offers. The first is holy shit, this is a lot. Mahomes, Bijan Worthy for Purdy, Ayuk, Mixon. I know it's been a struggle, but I still want the Mahomes side there. Bijan Robinson has faced 4 of this, he's basically faced 4 of the strongest, or 5 of the toughest run defenses in the league. It was the Steelers, the Saints, wasn't it the Broncos was one of them, and the Bucks with Vita Vea. Whenever Vita Vea actually plays for the Bucks, their run defense is killer. It's been rough sledding, I know, for Bijan, but I'm still sticking with Bijan Robinson. Especially because, I do like the combo of Purdy and Ayuk, but I think so. Rashee Rice, again, we talked about at the top of the show, was just declared as being done for the season. I do think Worthy, as the season continues, will get more and more usage. And the more usage that guy gets, the more efficiency that he can get in. I think down the stretch, Worthy potentially could be a league winner. So personally, I know it's been rough, but Mahomes, Bijan, and Worthy by a little bit, especially because Mixon, I don't know what's going on with that injury, and I don't love that they're trying to get him 30 carries the second he comes back. And the other one you said was Mahomes, Shaheed with return yards, and Jacobs for Lamar, Andrews, and Ridley. Fuck no. I love Lamar Jackson. He's honestly one of my favorite players, and I'm a Steelers fan. We should have drafted him. I lamented that since his draft class. But Mark Andrews is literally a toxic asset right now. And Calvin Ridley attached to either Will Levis or Mason Rudolph. Look, I have Calvin Ridley in a couple places, and I'm literally thinking about just straight dropping him. There's no way I would do that. Josh Jacobs to me is more valuable. Rashid Shaheed is more valuable. Again, I understand it's been rough for Mahomes. Mahomes is, again, I feel like people are like, oh, Mahomes is terrible. Mahomes sucks. He's averaging like 18 to 20 points a game. That's what people think sucks for Mahomes. Is it? Mahomes' floor is like Jared Goff's like ceiling for most games, honestly. Like, Again, I feel like people are acting like the ceiling is falling for Mahomes. I'm sticking with Mahomes still in a lot of places. The only place I've traded Mahomes this year, just to give you guys, because I have a lot of Mahomes, the only place I've traded him is in one dynasty league where I know I'm cooked because I have a shit ton of injuries, and it's a single quarterback league. And so only because of that, I traded Mahomes and a bunch of pieces for Anthony Richardson, and because I was able to get Joe Flacco too, so I just have Colts quarterback essentially. But I also got a fuck ton of draft picks. That was the thing. I got his first and second, and so now I have in that league 2 firsts, 2 seconds, 2 thirds going into next year to kind of do a fast rebuild on the fly. So that's like the only place that I've traded Mahomes. And again, in that situation, it's like technically I know Mahomes is a GOAT, but he is 30. And in a single quarterback league, if I can trade down as far as Anthony Richardson and get the draft capital to maybe trade him next year with Flacco in a package, get somebody new in and the rookie picks or whatever, like, again, single quarterback is a lot more flexible, so that's why I did that. Would you trade Devonta Smith and Higgins for A.J. Brown, PPR redraft? Yes, but yes, but I have to be a winning team right now. I have to be 5-0 or 4-1. And if I'm 4-1, I like that one that I lost had to have been like some bullshit, like real close or something. Like I got to be one of the highest scoring teams. The rest of my team has to be like super deep everywhere, basically. If I'm crushing and I've got the depth to move Devonta Smith and T. Higgins for A.J. Brown, and it's not going to impact me too much for the next couple of weeks. And when I say couple of weeks, I mean 1 to 2 weeks while he works back from the hammy himself. Like that, I would do. But if you're in a situation where it's the opposite, you're 1-4, you're 0-5, or whatever, like you're on the bottom end of the league, you can't afford to give up that depth. And especially with this year, with just all the injuries that have happened, like I know Devonta Smith also banged up. T. Higgins coming off a huge game. I mean, maybe that ends up turning around your season and you get – it would depend who was on waivers, how shallow the league was. Most situations, I want to do something like this where I package 2 kind of middling guys for a true superstar. But again, like if I'm in the winning circle right now, I'm making this trade all day. The only cause for pause I would even have is if I am like 1-4 or something, and I just like if I'm like, oh fuck, I lost Rashee Rice and Cooper Kupp and whoever else, and I'm just like half my team's on IR, like I might literally not be able to make this trade right now. But otherwise, I think in most situations, 100%. Jerome Ford and Pacheco for Dobbins and Brooks. Ooh. You know what? I would do that. I mean, the Cleveland Browns offense, I don't think they're getting any better. I shared a post earlier today, and it's actually like, as a Jerome Ford dynasty manager who had to trade him for Nico, like I traded Nico Collins away for Jerome Ford. And I know without context, you're like, what the fuck did you do? I'm like, trust me. All right. There's a whole backstory to it and it worked. Let me just say that. All right. There's a whole backstory to it and it worked. The bottom line is I'm now stuck with Jerome Ford. And I've had him in dynasty and I've been playing him. Cause again, with that a little bit out of context, that team only has 2 running backs in Derrick Henry and Kyron Williams. We got time. You guys are new here. Just very quickly. So the context was, it's a 16-team dynasty league. I've got wide receivers falling out of my ass. Just the way that I've managed this dynasty team is I've always just traded up for superstar wide receivers by trading a bunch of mid dudes, all my depth and all my picks. Right. So I've got no picks basically until 2026. But it's like on my team, I've got Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I've got Stephon Diggs, I'm Justin Jefferson. Like I'm literally forgetting Justin Jefferson. That's how many fucking superstar wide receivers I have on this one team. And imagine again in a 16-team nice league. Oh, by the way, I've also got Lamar and Mahomes in its super flex. And I have it stacked with Kelsey. So, like, my team is just ridiculous. But you look at the bench, and it's just a bunch of jabronis that you've never heard of. Like, literally, some of my best backups are, like, Josh Reynolds and, like, Khalif Raymond. And there are just, no running backs. And this is a league where there is no such thing as waivers, essentially, right? And so last year I was in a pinch where I just desperately needed that running back depth, and Nico Collins hadn't quite broken out yet. And so I traded Nico for Jerome Ford. And in championship week, which I played in, even though I lost, Jerome Ford got me 30-something fantasy points. Like, he had a monster day on championship week. So it was like for last year, for the purposes of me trying to get that championship, which was the whole reason I made the trade, it was like almost worked. If it had worked, I wouldn't give a fuck about how good Nico is anymore. I'd be like, I don't care. I got my championship. But again, it was like, unfortunately, no matter how good Jerome Ford was that day, I went up against the Dak CD stack that year. So it's just shit happens, right? But in Dynasty, you have to live with those kind of decisions. You know, that's the kind of thing that you do in redraft and nobody remembers, but you make that trade in Dynasty, now you've got to live with it. And so, very long-winded way of saying, Jerome Ford has been asked this year, but it's not his fault. In fact, Jerome Ford has been incredible this year. And in almost every game, he's averaging over 5 yards a carry. He's been excellent in the receiving games in terms of taking dump-offs and his efficiency. It's literally just that for some reason, Stefanski just insists on sticking Deontay Foreman in for 8 to 10 rushes up the center's ass for fucking 2 yards to carry, and just like everyone's blaming Deshaun Watson. As bad as Deshaun Watson has been, Kevin Stefanski really hasn't been that much better. Like, he's super overrated in terms of what he's doing. In terms of the scheme, the fact that he's not using Jerome Ford way more than he has been, like, again, Jerome Ford's been excellent. Like, he's clearly the best part of the offense right now, and he's just being massively underutilized. I almost feel like the only it's like, it's almost like, so it's so bad that it's giving me like conspiracy vibes of like, is Stefanski purposefully sorry, is Kevin Stefanski, it's choking me how bad it is, the usage. But the conspiracy theory I have is like, is Kevin Stefanski so sick of Deshaun Watson and wants him out so badly that he is purposely like withholding Jerome Ford in a sense, because that would make the offense look and run better, which would then help Deshaun Watson? Like, is that the only reason we're not seeing 18 to 20 touches a game for Jerome Ford? Because it doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, again, old busted Deonta Foreman, except for maybe like if you have to carry at the 1 yard line, like, ain't getting it done. So I don't know what the fuck they're doing, but Because Pacheco is hurt and definitely out for a solid chunk of time, and even when he comes back, it's going to take time for him to work back. None of these guys just come back and hit week one. It'll probably take a couple weeks. By that time, it would be probably, I would assume he is back by full health for like week 10, 11, maybe 12. So like, I don't know that you can absorb that. Whereas Jonathan Brooks, he's close to coming back, it seems like, should work into a timeshare. It feels like by the time that Pacheco is able to come back, Brooks should have been worked in to the system to the point where he is getting you kind of the same production. And what I'm really targeting here is Dobbins. Dobbins is getting all the work for the Chargers. They're coming off a bye week. He's their number one running back in a system that prioritizes running backs and will give him the carries even when he isn't having a great game. So he is, to me, the best player in the trade. And so, yeah, I actually would do Ford and Pacheco for Dobbins and Brooks. Done. All right, let's get into the farts.
Come on, don't bullshit me. Bullshit. 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 You said so bullshit.
Man, for quarterbacks this week, this was the under 20 club. Josh Allen looked horrendous. I think he had like 9 of 30. It was rough. And also, you know what? Fuck the Bills and like the whole, whatever organizational setup is there to protect the players failed Josh Allen clearly. I think we all know that. Like, he clearly was dealing with a concussion or some kind of head injury and came back into the game when he should not have. And then, however that relates to the idiocy of the fucking coach. I know they had 3 timeouts. It doesn't matter. If the Texans have the 3 timeouts, like in that situation when you're backed up on your goal line and your quarterback is fucked up and has like barely completed any passes all fucking day, and you have a superstar running back, you run the ball in that situation. Joe Brady's whole thing is running the ball. Like, they should have been leaning on James Cook, especially after the Josh Allen injury. So to argue that like, oh, well, they had their timeouts and that's why we threw the ball, it's like, yeah, okay, maybe you throw the ball like once on 3rd down. You don't fucking throw it 3 times, because even the amount of time that it takes for Josh Allen to take the ball, hand it to James Cook to run, maybe evade a couple dudes, turn it into like a 3 to 5 yard carry, get you out of the shadow of your own fucking end zone and create space, even if like it's creating space for the punter so the punter can get off a better kick to get it further downfield so that you're not at midfield. Like, there's a million reasons. Bro, I'm a fucking asshole sitting at home on my couch and I know this. How the fuck does Sean McDermott, an NFL head coach, not have this like built into their situational awareness in the fucking 2-minute drill? Like, it's so asinine to me that these NFL coaches, preach all this shit to the players about like preparation and organization, and then like can't follow through with very simple game plan awareness. Like, it's literally just common sense. Like, you run the ball because it'll A, eat up more clock, B, get you out of the shadow of your end zone, set up for a better punt, and D, make it harder for them to kick the fucking field goal they need. Like, sometimes it just feels like, again, and this is like a pet peeve of mine that I think permeates humankind. Like, you can find this in any business. It's not just NFL. This is just every walk of human life. There are people out there that just make their jobs seem so much more complicated than it needs to be to justify like the reason that they are the ones holding that job. You know what I mean? Like, you see this a lot with like middle management types, like supervisors and managers of like, they're not doing shit, but they're pretending like they are. All right. So yeah, that Josh Allen, Brock Purdy also, that was really disappointing. Just kind of ran into a tough divisional game against the Cardinals and they won the day. But historically Purdy had like ate up the Cardinals, so that was a matchup that I had highly targeted and was very disappointed in. And then Justin Fields, like if you try to go back to that, well, it didn't kill you, but there were definitely other better quarterback plays. So, you can. I also think that the Steelers were victim a little bit of the delay and the weather, because like I do think that if the game had started on time and with normal weather, the running game might have been just a little bit better. But again, this is not me saying that like the Steelers are some kind of like crazy good offense. Trust me, nobody has shit on the Steelers more than I have, and again, I'm a fan of the team, but I do think that Fields will continue to have better fantasy days, and if this is his floor, I do think he's going to continue to be a good streaming option. So, especially in Superflex, if you were able to get him, you just keep riding him. But the under 15 club, these were the guys that actually hurt you really bad. Matt Stafford, he doesn't have his weapons, so he's doing his best. Like he had 13 points, and honestly, that's pretty good for what he's working with right now. Gardner Minshew started really hot, and then just the wheels completely fell off, and he ended up getting benched for AOC. Aaron Rodgers someone made the joke of like the Jets offense almost looks like the quarterback fucked off to a drug trip in the offseason instead of going to training camp. And it's the case. The truth is like he threw more in the offseason than he was able to last season even. Like I think that was kind of underrated in how much he actually worked with the offense. And it still is looking rough out there. Deshaun Watson, though. Deshaun Watson just is honestly, I think, the worst quarterback in the NFL right now because of the level of money and expectations and the story and just when you consider everything that's involved with the Deshaun Watson situation, I do think that is by far the worst quarterback situation in the NFL right now. Like the NFL, again, as a Steelers fan, I've spent half my life with Browns fans and Ravens fans and Bengals fans. And I can tell you, Browns fans especially, there's a little bit of like a little brother syndrome, I feel like, with a lot of Steelers fans and the way that we kind of view the Browns of like, you root for your little brother. You don't want them to beat you. Like when the Steelers face them, we love that we beat the shit out of them all the time. But when they play other people, right, it's like we kind of almost like are rooting for them, right? And I don't know if other Steelers fans feel that way. That's how I feel anyways. And I know that is a commonality amongst many fans. I know it's not every fan, okay? But there's a lot of fans out there that feel that way. So I really think like Browns fans more than ever in their history are just like dejected at this point where they really just like can't deal with it. So yeah, I really I feel bad at this point for Browns fans. But yeah, Sam Darnold finally turned back into a little bit of pumpkin, and so did Andy Dalton. That one sucked. For running backs, Kenneth Walker, that one was weird against the Giants. Again, the whole matchup against the Giants was just fucking weird. Rashad White, Bijan Robinson, talked about it a little bit earlier. I'm still in on Bijan. I will say the coaching staff is starting to scare me a little bit because the way that they were talking about like, oh, we're going to use him in the CMC role. I never bought into that. But this is the same offense that utilized Kyren Williams last year. Bijan Robinson is basically just Kyren Williams souped up. So I was very much expecting Kyren Williams utilization. And when we did not get that, that's when I started to get really concerned. So, yeah, I think I'm still in on Bijan Robinson, and the schedule is going to get better. But yeah, I that's where I'm like, I'm still in on Bijan, Najee Harris is another one. Like it sucks right now, but if you drafted Najee, you have to know by now that you drafted him for the second half of the season and for gross volume. So he's one that you just kind of have to suffer through. I think Jordan Mason is one that is really rough. And again, this was like his first really bad game. You've been able to lean on him in the absence of CMC. I do think he's just going to bounce back next week, though. Travis Etienne, though. This one is starting to get real concerning. I think just the fact that he's dealing with the injuries and that Tank Bigsby is really starting to pop for this offense, definitely concerning. Antonio Gibson is hilarious. If you bought the Ramondre Stevenson benching, like, I'm sorry, like I feel like you don't watch this show because that's just bullshit coach speak. That like you should never fall for that. If a coach says that he's benching his running back in a situation like what they were talking about with Ramondre and Antonio Gibson, it's like, yeah, this whole thing of like the ceremonial first touch going to Antonio Gibson for him to never be seen again for the rest of the game. It's like, it's so fucking stupid. And then Ramondre ends up on the heart list and Antonio Gibson on the fart list. So that's just the kind of thing of like, there's certain coaches and coach speak you should be able to identify, and that is one of them. And so if you got fooled by that, I apologize. But hey, you know what? Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 3 times. I mean, shame on me again. Fool me 4 times, though. Now, shame on you. You're taking advantage of someone. But yeah, let's move on. Zach Moss, Jerome Ford, Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones, that one sucked. He got injured. Tyler Algier, if you tried to sneak him in. Brees Hall and Braylon Allen. What the fuck is going on with the Jets running game? Where is Brees Hall? Can we get an APB out for Brees Hall? Remember when people were arguing in the beginning of the season? Is it Bijan or Brees Hall for RB number 1? Turns out the answer was neither. Justice Hill, again, that one just fades into the distance. If you try to chase Justice Hill points, you will often be disappointed. Devon Achane, just look, Dolphins offense, you can't play them until they get a quarterback. And also, you know what? Talking about earlier, a failure to do your job. The fact that the Miami Dolphins had the opportunity to sign Joe Flacco, and they told him no. Like, what are you doing? You know that even in the best of worlds, that Tua is a potential injury risk. So, like, yeah, you need to back him up with a viable veteran backup quarterback. And the fact that could you imagine Joe Flacco in this offense right now with Tyreek, Jalen Waddle, and all the running backs that they have? Like, man, that would be something. But no. For wide receivers, Jaden Reed, it was 4 for 78, so it's not like it was terrible, but the one that sucked was Dontavian Wicks, and that's one where I feel like I also fell into the trap. Like every fantasy analyst and their grandmother had Dontavian Wicks both on waivers, sleepers, and starts. Like we all had him, and the targets were there. He had 7 targets, but it was kind of a wonky game, turned a little weird defensive. He only caught 2 passes, so it was a really bad day for Dontavian Wicks, but I'm kind of staying in those flames. And then kind of the rest of the wide receivers that really let you down. Like Christian Kirk, I actually thought he was going to be a smash, and he only went 4 for 88, and it was like all on one pass. Like Stephon Diggs' revenge game, especially the fact that Nico Collins went out, and he still only ended up with 6 for 82, which not bad, but not what you wanted. And then these are the guys that actually let you down. Like Tyreek Hill, just, again, struggling very much with whatever Dolphins quarterback. CeeDee Lamb, that was like a whole weird thing. I'll attribute that partly to Steelers defense is really good, but also the stuff going on with him and Dak right now is off-putting. I don't know. It feels like they just have an off vibe to the Cowboys right now. Chris Godwin kind of was just, these were very middling. Amari Cooper suffering from Deshaun Watson. Jalen Waddle, Tank Dell, Roma Dunes, Keenan Allen, Deontay Johnson popped up on the list. He saw like 13 and 15 targets, and then Panthers just kind of got routed here. Bryce Young took over hilariously in the later part of the game, so that should tell you how bad it was for them. Deontay Johnson was a dud, unfortunately, this week. Marvin Harrison Jr. That's when I said if Marvin Harrison Jr. doesn't have historical rookie numbers, he's going to feel bad as a draft pick in the first round. And so far, he's had really like one great game, and then the rest has been kind of and then DK Metcalf, just again, weird game for the Seahawks. Cortland Sutton, George Pickens, Trey Tucker, Debo Samuel, and Jawan Jennings, just to wrap it up. And then for tight ends, like, holy shit. Tight ends are just the grossest thing of life right now. And it's all your good tight ends that you can hope for. Mark Andrews, Cole Kmet, Pat Freiermuth. If you tried playing Cade Otton or Dalton Schultz, the breakout for Dalton Kincaid, yet to arrive. If you tried to stream Hunter Henry or one of the Bengals tight ends in Gesicki or Eric Hall, if you tried to play Zach Ertz, if you tried to play David Njoku in his first game back, the Njoku was on you. Fucking Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram just like being questionable for the entire week, so that I couldn't put him out. And then at the end of the week being like, oh yeah, no, I'm not playing. Like, just be out, you stupid motherfucker. That actually fucked me over really bad in one league. I'm in too many leagues this year. I'm in 26 like redraft and dynasty and tournament leagues. And there was one where I forgot that just, you know, if you do the like rolling waiver thing, have it so that on Sundays, like people can just add drop as they please. But because that's what it was that I missed that. Not only was it a rolling waiver, but that the ad that I would have had to make would have had to been the prior day because they roll at 3 a.m. So any ads I was trying to make on the Sunday morning that I thought would roll at like noon, because usually when you have a league like that, the waivers will roll at noon time. And I didn't realize that for this league, actually, no, it's 3 a.m. So it means that it already rolled for that day, meaning I couldn't pick up anyone until the Monday. So it was like I just didn't play a tight end. And then on defense, the Ravens, Colts, Jags, Raiders, Bills, and Texans. If you tried playing any of them, they all sucked. Fart of the week, George Pickens, 26 yards. Yeah, and it was a good matchup too. Like the Cowboys are really banged up. I do think part of it had to do with the delay and the weather and all of that stuff. But I will say that if you come out with the fucking tape on your face that says always fucking open, you can't have a game for 26 yards. I don't give a shit. Like, Jalen Tolbert had a nice game in the same weather, so he's got no excuses. And then Sir Football, shout out to you, my sir. I'm worried Brees will be a bust this year. The Jets offense seems to be letting Rodgers chuck it everywhere and pray. Yeah, I mean, the offensive line is ass too, is part of the problem. So it's like, and the play, again, it's like combination of play calling, offensive line, and quarterback play all is playing a factor here. But one of the things I really hate is when you have a Brees Hall or a Bijan Robinson and you have them running the types of plays where they're going in the A and B gap, those are the type of guys that you put those guys in outside zone. Yes, there will be some times where they're going to lose you yards, but the plays when they're going to gain you yards are going to be usually the type of game-breaking running plays that you want from your running offense. Daniel, is Wilson and Ayuk a sell high? Garrett Wilson, yes, because the odds that you're going to see 22 targets a game, very low. Now, a sell high, I mean, I don't know exactly what you're going to be able to get for him. Just to give you a perfect example, though, of the two, literally between the two guys, you said if I could trade Garrett Wilson for Brandon Ayuk, I would do that. I actually think Ayuk will be fine for the rest of the season. Again, it's already kind of getting baked into the storylines now. And I've even heard the announcers kind of mention it of like, you know, the NFL doesn't have a preseason anymore. And so it kind of takes these guys 4 weeks to get going anyways. And it's like, well, okay, if it already is taking the guys who were there 4 weeks to get going, like imagine the guys who were not there, right? Like Brandon Ayuk. I don't know how much CeeDee Lamb ended up missing. Jamar Chase, kind of you saw it took a little while. So yeah, I mean, I would be willing to sell Wilson for Reed. That's an interesting one. I think Jaden Reed has more upside for the rest of the year. I think Christian Watson is dust. Even when he is there, I don't think he detracts necessarily from what Jaden Reed does. I think Jaden Reed is developing into Jordan Love's favorite target. And I think Jordan Love is a better quarterback at this stage of his career, ironically enough, than Aaron Rodgers. I do like Garrett Wilson, but it's also a tougher division, tougher matchups. I actually think I would make this trade, which is crazy. I don't think I would have said that before week 1 even. But yeah, I think at this point in the season, given everything that I've seen, I wouldn't hate this. I think you have a lot more upside with Jaden Reed for the rest of the year. I mean, again, Jaden Reed is coming off a bad game, and it was 4 for 78. So if he had like 2 more catches or 3 more catches, like Garrett Wilson just had 13 catches for 101 yards. Could you imagine if Jaden Reed had 13 catches? Motherfucker would break the fucking receiving yards record held by Willie Anderson from like 1956 or whatever it is. Like, yeah, when I look at the ceiling play for Reed compared to Wilson this year, I mean, in Dynasty, I wouldn't do this, but in just a redraft league, I think this is a ballsy kind of trade that I would make. All right, let's get into some waivers.
The fuck? The fuck? The fuck is in the air. The fuck? There's white shit everywhere. The fuck? I must be fucking baked and this shit's probably fake. The fucking hell did I just take? The fuck?
Oh, it's gross in these quarterback streets, but Mitchell Trubisky is going to be the number 1 quarterback pickup of the week, probably in super flex leagues and deep leagues like that. And also, I would stash Nick Mullins. I think Sam Darnold was fine. There was that moment he came out of the game though, and if that had been permanent, Nick Mullins would be a hot ad on waivers. So if you're a Sam Darnold owner in Superflex, or if you're in a deep dynasty league or something like that, I would definitely be picking up Nick Mullins. For running backs, Tyrone Tracy, going to be a very popular ad this week. You're going to have to dump a lot of fab on him. But I think actually even more than Tyrone Tracy, I love Ty Chandler. This Vikings team has been like using running backs. I mean, the way they utilized Aaron Jones in not just the running game, but in the passing game, Ty Chandler will fill that role right away. I think he immediately becomes a low-end flex play, like kind of borderline running back 2, especially if Aaron Jones like just misses the week. So I really like Ty Chandler. He's actually going to be low-key one of my primary targets on waivers. And then again, as a deeper stash, Isaac Guerendo, I think, just needs to be owned. We saw Jordan Mason kind of start to slow down a little bit for the 49ers. If anything were to happen to him, Guerendo, it seems like, is the next man up. And he's starting to get a little bit of touches. He looks just like a violent runner. And I think Shanahan just likes him. They did draft him too, and he's got speed. If you remember, he was that running back in the draft that was like a bigger guy that ran like a 4.35 or something crazy. So he is someone to monitor and definitely just have stashed. For wide receiver, I would still have Dontavian Wicks on this list. And the reason is because I think after a 2-catch game when a lot of people picked him up and probably stuck him right in the lineup in a week where there was a lot of bye weeks too, and he might have been a fill-in, I definitely could see him dropping and hitting a lot of waivers. I would be scooping him up. He's still a younger, raw prospect. All of these guys are. They're going to have bad games. But the games when he hits, he's definitely worth owning and having on a roster and being flexed in good matchups. And again, it was 2 catches, but it was on 7 targets. And that was 7 targets in a game where Jordan Love wasn't really like airing it out. It was kind of a little bit more wonky, and they really leaned on Josh Jacobs down the stretch to kind of get them the win. So I think you could still see a lot more from Wicks. So if he were to get dropped, he's worth an ad. Alec Pierce at this point, I think, is a hilarious name that, if you're just beat up, like if you're one of these teams that like, especially last week, if you had AJ Brown and Puka or Cooper Kupp or Rashi Rice or any God, there's just countless huge names just on IR or out or injured or that were on bye last week. Like Amon Ra was on bye last week. Like if you were in that situation and you could have just taken the shot on Alec Pierce. He was probably available, and it's the Gabe Davis thing of this guy might get me 0, but he might also get me 20. And I think actually there's a little bit more stability involved when it's Joe Flacco, because Flacco will just throw it around the yard 30 times a game, and all it takes is really like one bomb to Pierce, and he's just always like the forgotten dude. Like that's got to be his nickname, right? The forgotten man is Alec Pierce, because it's just like the defense is like, all right, we've got Adonai Mitchell covered, we've got Michael Pittman covered, we got Josh Downs even covered, we're covering the run game, we're all good. Did we miss anything? Alec Pierce is behind us 20 yards downfield. What the fuck? Like that's how it feels every game. So I think, Alec Pierce might be worth a deep, like a stash, and he might be worth just flexing for shits and giggles now and again. And then again, deeper leagues, if Darius Slayton is floating out there, when Malik Neighbors misses, Darius Slayton is worth a spot start. But again, this has been the history of his career. He'll pop up for a huge game like this. People will pick him up, try and play him, and he will absolutely disappear on you next week. So this is not any kind of reliable situation, but this is, again, very much like 16 teams and deeper. And then I think the hot ad this week is going to be Jalen Tolbert. That's one that, it's funny because I drafted him in Dynasty, and I kind of gave up on Jalen Tolbert. And he has always been a character guy, and character guys, generally speaking, it feels like take a little bit longer to really find their spot in an NFL offense. And it's because, yes, as much as they have like really great character, and they're the type of guys that are like the work pail lunch guys that like show up in the building first in, last out type dudes, like that's all well and good, but a lot of times those guys don't have the same type of athleticism that you look for in like your high-end picks. That's why these guys end up going in like the 5th round. It like your 4th and 5th round wide receivers a lot of time are like, they're not as athletic as first round guys, but man, these guys have heart. They have character. Like there's something about them, right? And Tolbert was very much one of those guys for the Cowboys that I thought would be able to kind of find his place sooner rather than later, but it took longer than I expected. So I think I'm a fan of his, and it's nice to see. I will say it's been a little bit more consistent this year, I think, through just lack of options. So I think he is going to be the hot ad and worth adding on waivers this week. And then for tight end, get a little strange. Brenton Strange. If Everett Ingram just continues to be out, Strange is worth a flyer. Just like every tight end is basically at this point, like if they get in the end zone, they can finish as a top 10 tight end. And Strange has that possibility. Isaiah Likely was very likely dropped in a lot of leagues. I know I had to drop him, even though I spent a shit ton of fab on him in a league where I just had no other choice, basically. Because I had picked him up as because I had Trey McBride, and McBride was hurt. And then so now McBride was back, so I didn't need him anymore, and I had some other situation going on. But it's just to say that like keep an eye out if he was dropped. And another one is Cade Otton. I feel like Cade Otton was probably picked up in a lot of leagues, will probably get dropped in a lot of leagues. But they're going to be against New Orleans, and Mike Evans historically has struggled against New Orleans. And so I could see that being a situation where that, like, Cade only had 3 catches for, I think, 40 yards. He had like 7 points. I can see this being back to the 7-8 target, kind of like 6 for 80 type game for him. So this is one where I would be wanting to stream him. And then this is real sneaky. Philadelphia Eagles, guys, are on a bye week. Go pick up their defense. If you are in a league where you're allowed to drop someone on your bench that has already played that sucked, that you're planning on dropping anyways, go and drop them right now and pick up this Philadelphia Eagles defense. They get the Cleveland Browns at home next week. And on top of that, like I said, you might be able to just do that right now. Literally go check. If your league allows you to drop that player that you don't want on your bench that already ran, drop them, pick up Eagles defense, and when you put your waiver ad in, just put it in for whatever defense that you had streaming last week, and you drop them instead. So that's a quick handy move you can go do in a lot of leagues tonight. But otherwise, I also like the Texans, Houston Texans next week at the New England Patriots offense. And then the Atlanta Falcons are going to be taking on the Carolina Panthers. Even though it's a road matchup, Panthers have definitely struggled enough this year on offense that I would play the defense against them. And what should I do with Godwin? You keep him, Daniel. I mean, I know he hasn't been having the same quite of blow-up games that he was having towards the beginning of the year, but he is being heavily utilized out of the slot. His role is firm and cemented. I know it doesn't always feel great when you get those kind of floor-end 10-point PPR games, but that's the floor. And you're getting that consistently week in and week out, but you're also getting the upside of he is getting touchdowns. He is having weeks where he goes 7 for 100 or whatever. Like I've had Godwin in a lot of places, so I would say you just continue to live with it. The only way I would be getting rid of Godwin is if I was really able to somehow package him up into a superstar. Like, I don't know, if you told me somehow last week before the blow-up game you traded Godwin and Kyron Williams for Jamar Chase and Zach Moss or something like that, like I'd be like, yeah, kudos. Like, that's a great trade. But I definitely would not be trying to go sideways, and I wouldn't be trying to go down. So, I mean, obviously, you're not going to trade down, but I like Godwin. I would just hold on to him. So, hey, super appreciate everyone jumping in and watching today. We will be back on Thursday night, probably 7 p.m. Going to go live, I would hope. We'll be doing the matchups for next week, week 6 of NFL Fantasy Football. And then, of course, there's also the Sunday live show. I do them every morning at 9 a.m., so you can check those out. Worst interview is a little bit on hiatus. But we have like a catalog of over 50 shows. So if you guys want to go check those out, I would super appreciate it. If you want to like and subscribe, it really helps the show and the algorithms and all that bullshit. But man, till the next time, enjoy Sunday night. Enjoy Monday Night Football. I'm going to enjoy Monday Night Raw, and I'll catch all of you guys on the flip side.
He's running down the middle by the 50. He's at the 30. He's bare-chested and banging his chest. Now he runs the opposite way. He runs at the 50. He runs at the 40. The guy is drunk, but there he goes. The 20. They're chasing him. They're not going to get him. Waving his arms, bare-chested. Somebody stop that man. Here comes